What's a myth most people believe is still true? Mice love cheese. Mice will eat anything they can find with nutritional value, but they don't even like cheese really. They'd rather eat fruit or candy. Also, cheese dries up quickly in traps, and so unless the mouse in your house is very hungry, it probably won't set off the trap. Goldfish have a short memory. They can actually have a memory span for up to 5 months. Yeah, it's their attention spans that are short. Albert Einstein never failed math in school. He mastered differential and integral calculus by age 14 and consistently received top grades in all his math and science classes. You know who did fail math? M.C. Escher. All those math teachers who talk about how he used mathematic equations to complete his work is completely untrue. He just had impeccable hand-eye coordination, and a damn good sense of spatial awareness. I just figured he tripped down a flight of stairs and sprouted an idea from it. Before Columbus, everyone thought the world was flat. That the earth is round has been known for thousands of years, and multiple cultures came to this conclusion independently. Didn't an ancient Greek mathematician calculate the circumference? And wasn't he super close to the right answer? That a woman found a finger in her Wendy's chili. She later pled guilty and was sent to jail cause it was all faked. The only fake part is that the finger originated from Wendy's. Her name was Anna Ayala, and she planted the finger in the chili. The finger belonged to an associate of her husband who had lost the finger in an industrial accident. That blood is blue unless it's exposed to oxygen, then turns red. There is a color difference, which is probably why this myth has so much traction. But it's always red in humans. It's just brighter or darker based on the amount of oxygen. Marilyn Mason removed his ribs to give himself BL jobs. I don't know how that one traveled so fast without the internet. Even in my elementary school in southeast Mexico had that one. Same. Somehow it reached a small village in interior Portugal too. According to aerodynamics, the bee shouldn't be able to fly. Edit meant to quote laws of aviation. The correct phrase is humans don't know how insect wings generate as much lift as they do, which was true until it stopped being true. Even that is overselling it to some degree if I remember correctly. People were all but certain it was a result of transient effects from the wings flapping for a long time before it was successfully simulated. Dogs see in black and white and gray, which is not true. They see in yellow, blue, and gray. We can see colors because we have 6 million cone photoreceptor cells, but dogs have 20%, which would roughly be 1,200,000, which in contrast only produces blue and yellow. They have 2 cones in their eyes which produce only yellow and blue, contrary to humans which have 3 rings that produce red, yellow and blue. The limited color perception dogs have is called dichromatic vision. Even then, they don't really see gray. Much like color-blind people, it's just harder to distinguish colors in that spectrum. For a dog, anything from red to green would essentially be just different shades of yellow, brown, white colors. Myth: you need to wait 24 hours before reporting a missing person. Truth: no, you don't. The sooner you report a missing person, the higher the chances are of them being found alive. TV: you have to wait 24 hours before reporting a missing person. Also TV: the first 24 hours are the most important for finding a missing person. The myth that we swallow a certain amount of spiders every year. It literally originated from an article about how people will accept anything they read online as fact. Edit LOL. It seems that even the original article isn't the origin of the myth, despite me reading from some publishers that it was. Talk about a double myth. No, it's true. I just exclusively eat enough spiders to balance out the average of all those who don't. Up until a few months ago, I still believed that if someone was HIV positive they could essentially develop full-blown AIDS at any moment without warning. And any bodily fluid could pass the virus on to someone else, so it would be very dangerous to even so much as share a toothbrush with them. That's what I was taught as a kid by parents and teachers, so it's what I believed. The concept of someone taking a pill until the virus becomes undetectable in their system blew my mind. I know someone who had HIV and didn't even know until he got C. diff. By that time it was already AIDS. He lives a normal life with the help of medications, but he's never been undetectable. Before he knew about his diagnosis, he ended up giving it to another woman. She has HIV but has been undetectable for years. Lesson here: get tested, especially if you engage in high-risk behaviors. And for certain people they have PrEP available, which is a medicine you take every day to prevent HIV infection. How shaving your facial hair makes it grow back thicker. I'm half convinced that this was started by parents who wanted their teenage sons to shave off that scraggly patchy beard. Victorian women had ribs removed in order to corset their waist even tinier. There is zero historical evidence for that. Do people even know how risky surgery was in the Victorian era? Germ theory had only become scientifically accepted near the end of the era, and it took longer for the public to accept it. That surgery would pretty much be a death sentence. But people want to reinforce the narrative that all corsets were oppressive and exist. Bonus: really only high society women would tightlace their corsets for limited periods of time X, for their wedding or special event. Before 1840s tightlacing wasn't even possible because eyelets were hand-bound and couldn't put up with the strain. So any media depicting tightlacing before that time are just lying. This is a topic I'm very passionate about. Corsets in general get a bad rap. Worn correctly, they were reasonably comfortable and didn't do any of the bone organ deformation horror pictures you see. Period. TV movies portrays corsets as worn directly over bare skin, usually either because it's easier or to highlight the marks when it comes off, but normally they were worn over light underwear, for obvious reasons to prevent marks and discomfort. That the band AC/DC made 11 albums that sound exactly the same, according to guitarist Angus Young, who was sick of people making that claim. In fact, we've made 12 albums that sound exactly the same. And if a band changes their sound, fans complain about that, too. You can't win. Most people still believe that dumb chestnut about how we only use 5% of our brains. I wish more people would use at least 5% of their brain, especially on the highway. Hymen virginity. I used to prosecute tax crimes. We had to educate a lot of juries that, not only is the hymen not a seal over the private part, how TF would virgins menstruate if this were true? It can grow back and is not necessarily broken by tax. In fact, a 10-year-old girl can be repeatedly raped and have zero physical signs of it. Interesting medical fact: sometimes the hymen does seal over the private part, resulting in an apparent lack of menstruation and an array of unpleasant symptoms. The condition is called imperforate hymen. It's corrected easily by surgery. Making more money and going into a higher tax bracket will cause them to lose money overall. That dietary fat is the source of body fat. I know most people still think it's true because we still have the low-fat versions of every food that we've had since the 80s. That learning multiple languages at once will hinder your child's intelligence. Sure, when they're young they'll make mistakes and take longer to sort out vocabulary, but in the end they'll be better for knowing more than one. Sometimes they'll even do better in grammar lessons etc. because they have a richer understanding of how language works. Living in the US South, my friend who is Danish was told by the public school teacher that speaking Danish at home and English at school was very harmful for his son. Luckily he's smart and ignored the teacher. That if you swallow gum it stays in your stomach for 5-7 years. This obviously is not true. While it'll probably make you constipated if you swallow a lot of gum very frequently, it goes through the body just like everything else. Edited it to say gum. Ducking autocorrect. That 30 years olds were considered to be old in the Middle Ages. The reason that the average generally, since that era was several centuries long and different countries had different circumstances, life expectancy was 30 was because the infant mortality rate was much higher than it was today. If you survived past infancy, you could reasonably expect to live to 60-70. Yes, this irks me, too. I did a lot of ancestry research for lots of families for my work, and throughout the centuries I saw lots of people who, if there wasn't an event like war, famine or plague, lived to old ages very similar to today, especially if the family was well off, so they didn't have to do hard physical labor. That it's illegal to turn on the inside light of a car while driving in the dark, so I still get freaked out when my kids turn the light on at night while I'm driving, for 2 reasons. One, I still somewhat have that belief in my head, along with our small town being overrun with cops that are far too happy to ruin your night for any reason they can. We don't have the best history with them, either. 2, I can't see that great at night, so any light within the car takes away even more vision. I even keep the lights on my dash turned down as low as possible so I can see better. I do wonder where that rumor began though. Edit spelling. It's dangerous to wake a sleepwalker. Yeah, no. Though it's advised not to wake a sleepwalker, as that could make them disoriented and confused. It's not actually dangerous. Some people believe that waking them up could cause a heart attack, which is not true. My ex believed this so wholeheartedly. I was taking Champix to quit smoking and as a side effect I started sleepwalking. Got out of bed one night bare-ass naked and went for a walk around the block. Ex just followed me just to make sure my naked walk was safe. Like, dude. You will get cramps if you swim right after eating. As a child, teen, young adult, I always misheard it as you'll get crabs if you go swimming right after eating, which confused and terrified the shit out of me. GMOs are inherently bad. It's false. Edit 1. As every invention of humanity, it can be used badly or it can be used to do good, but again it's not inherently bad, and I believe if used with even a little bit of ethics behind them they can do wonders. So PLS before writing under yes, but first ask yourselves if it could be avoided with a little bit of legislation based on the concept of not being a dick. And thank you everyone for all the interesting and helpful comments. Corporate greed makes it bad, but I agree, GMO are amazing. From insulin to golden rice to spider goat, genetic modification were involved and need better PR. That frivolous lawsuits are rampant in the US. This was specifically fabricated by McDonald's lawyers in the infamous coffee burn incident, in which a restaurant consistently violated food safety laws after multiple warnings and ended up in an elderly woman receiving third-degree burns to her lap and genitals, requiring multiple skin grafts. McDonald's people spun it as a person too dumb to know that coffee would be hot and trying to bilk a corporation for easy money. Ultimately, the woman won her suit for medical costs, but McDonald's won the media social victory by planting the idea of frivolous lawsuits in the public consciousness, and the phrase has been consistently cited since then to cast doubt on anyone trying to hold corporations to account for shady practices that lead to harm. Also, while she technically won over $2 million, the judge ruled that she was only entitled to $640,000, which wasn't what she received anyway because they settled out of court. All Stella Liebeck wanted was her medical costs covered. McDonald's refused, which led to the lawsuit. She wasn't some greedy monster looking for a payday, and she even admitted to partial fault since she was holding the cup between her legs when it spilled. The jury factored this into their calculation of damages. 50% of marriages end in divorce. People often get this rate by dividing the number of weddings in a year by the number of divorces in a year, which doesn't take into account that those who divorced didn't get married that year. The rate did peak at around 41% about 40 years ago but has been falling since then. Edit. I realized that I should mention this is an American-centric statistic. I am not sure where this stands for other countries. This is actually kinda true though. The issue is how it's measured. It's the joke that marriages either end in death or divorce. To calculate a successful marriage, you'd have to wait around for someone to die. So if Betty and Bob marry and live for 70 years, that's a successful marriage. You can't count it as a success until that moment. Plus, successful marriages can only be counted once per couple, whereas divorces can happen multiple times for a person. So Bob can get married and divorced 9 times, but on the 10th has a lifelong marriage. He skews the numbers so it looks more divorces than successful marriages. So the 50% divorce thing is really just a bad measure of how weddings, marriages, divorces are counted. Beer before liquor, never been sicker. Liquor before beer, you're in the clear. Just don't overdrink. Similarly, don't mix liquors. You have to stay with what you started with. Literally makes no scientific or physiological sense. Doesn't even make mixology sense because there's plenty of DuckTales containing multiple liquor varietals. Left brain, right brain. Totally debunked. One that's starting to get taken apart is the idea that men and women's brains are structurally different. That one is turning out to be BS too. Brains are much like kidneys, livers, hearts. Maybe a size difference but structurally identical. It's pretty fascinating. Money can't buy happiness. Wanna bet? There was a study about this and the answer is how you spend money. People who spend money on things are not as happy as those who spent money on services. The reason is that paying someone to mow your lawn frees up your time. Anything bought that had an effect of more free time for the purchaser tended to increase the happiness of the person spending the money. If you are loyal to your company will be loyal to you. Edit. As long as you believe this, you will be exploited by the company you work for. The sooner you realize this, the sooner you will be on your way to doing something worth your time, such as starting your own e-commerce company or making money from ad revenue on YouTube. For the most part I agree, but it's not as if this is always the case with 100% of employers. There aren't many, but I do have a couple friends who were able to get a couple promotions these past few years by testing them. Basically pointed out what the going rate was for a lateral move or minor jump to another company, and they came back and said, here, we'll match it, no problem. I know this is usually the exception, but it seems like far too often I see advice of bail every 2 years. You'll never earn what you deserve otherwise, like it's black and white. If you're lucky and have a good boss, staying loyal can be beneficial. No need to burn bridges just because you heard that's the only way to get rewarded. Most the backstory of Elon Musk. He's not qualified to be an engineer. His degrees concerning engineering are mostly bachelor's. Both his parents' families are rich and he received money from both. He's not a co-founder of PayPal. After he attempted a hostile takeover common for him when two previous companies merged. He was fired after only 5 months before the company became PayPal and went public, but he benefited from owning stock. He's not a founder of Tesla. That was another hostile takeover after the actual founders contacted Musk about fundraising. He's not an innovator. He steals other people's ideas and companies, grift through massive hype, and if the ideas ever do come to fruition, they aren't delivered on time and or as promised. Even his most successful product, the Model 3, remember when it was supposed to sell for $35K, be full self-driving, and capable of making $35K annually as a driverless taxi when you weren't using it. He said it was fiscally insane to not buy one. Well, at least the Model 3 actually made it to market, unlike the Tesla Semi, Cybertruck, and Roadster 2, or the Hyperloop that turned from supersonic pods gliding on cushions of air and vacuum tunnels into a glorified underground 30-mile taxi service that can't meet required passenger hour count, or his Solar City company he forced Tesla to buy to save his ass because it was billions in debt. He was in court over that in 2021, which the solar roof tiles never came to be as promised, while he lied about it at a hype event, or the dismal Starlink internet that requires tens of thousands of satellites for coverage, but has the same speed as satellite internet companies that only need 3-5 satellites for full global coverage, but costs insanely more, or the SpaceX Boca Chica location that's broken the FAA regulations and has put multiple endangered species in danger of becoming extinct. The list goes on, and through it all, his sycophants will continue to support this charlatan. I can hear the pitter-patter of all the muskrats' feet as they come storming in to downvote and make comments to support their techno king. I don't know when this became a myth in my family, but if you decide to breastfeed, you can't be sad or overwhelmed because your milk will rot. When I was discharged from the hospital after 3 days due to an emergency C-section, I was understandably uncomfortable and overwhelmed, not being able to get up and move around without having shooting pains from my surgery. My mom and sister visited me to help out with the baby, but once they saw me get ready to nurse, they freaked out, screaming, "No, you can't nurse your baby with your nasty rotten milk." First time mom. I was heartbroken. I've set my goals to exclusively breastfeed my baby. My sister picked up my baby, left the room, and fed her formula she hid in her car. Next day I went to my lactation consultant, desperately looking for ways to get rid of my rotten milk. She was completely shocked and told me to take a deep breath and nurse my baby. I was and still am 7 years later very bitter over it.